So almost every single car that I've ever owned, I financed. I haven't paid cash for hardly any of the cars, except for a lot of the classic cars I paid cash for. All the newer vehicles, they've all been financed. My SRT4s, the Charger, the Durango, these two, my first Viper, they've all been financed. And today I wanna go ahead and discuss why I choose to finance them versus paying cash. The first reason, of course, is I don't like having a lot of cash on hand in general. And it's something I've talked about in previous videos. I view cash as a depreciating asset because inflation on average is about, I think, 3.8%. So you're essentially losing 4% of the value of your money each and every year you have it in cash. And so I'd rather not have that depreciating asset lying around. Not to mention the fact that you have large sums of cash. I now we're talking beyond $250,000 in the bank, the FDIC will only cover about that much. So if you have more than that and that bank goes kaput, you're gonna be potentially SOL on that difference. And so I don't like having cash, large sums of cash available. And of course, a certain amount of reserves available, yes, makes sense. But for the most part, I like having my cash invested into more tangible assets or other investments, real estate, stock, vehicles, precious metals, all these types of assets that are going to appreciate in value versus depreciate. Granted, people say, yeah, well, cars are a depreciating asset. Well, to a certain extent, yes and no. I mean, depends on what type of cars you're buying and what the intent is with them. And most of the vehicles I have now are all appreciating assets. You could argue the Charger and the Durango are probably on the depreciating end, especially the Durango being a brand new vehicle. But like the SRT4 at this point, from what I paid for it, it's going up in value. It's definitely worth more than I paid for it and what I've got invested in it. The Charger is definitely not worth what we paid for it back in 2016. The Viper, of course, is a great example of an appreciating asset. I mean, I bought this car for a heck of a lot less money than it's worth now. And then the Ferrari, well, it's early to see how that's gonna go, but all indications at this point is that the 458 is a great vehicle to invest in. Having the tangible assets versus the depreciating cash is a huge point on why I go ahead and finance. Now, along the same lines of cash being a depreciating asset, with a loan, especially the longer term you have, whether it's 3, 5, 7, 12, 15, 20 years, you're buying the car today at this price, cash continues to depreciate at a rate of roughly 4% a year. You're basically buying it for less because of the cost of $1 at the end of that term. Now, of course, you do offset that with what the interest rate is on the loan that you've got. So of course, you have to take that into consideration as well. But the other factor, of course, is if I can take that cash that I would have paid for the car up front and put it into a market that's gonna be getting double-digit return on my investment, then not only am I getting a better return on my money from having it getting a better yield percentage-wise than what the interest rate on the loan is, but you also factor in the 4% loss a year on the dollar, you're really coming out ahead at the end of that, whatever the length of the loan is. Now, another factor in why I like to finance my vehicles is it allows me to purchase vehicles before I can go ahead and put that amount of cash together to go ahead and make the purchase. And the reason I like to do that is, at this point, with a couple of exceptions, I'm trying to buy investment grade vehicles like the Viper and the 458 and even the SRT4 at this point. If I buy them now and finance them now when I don't necessarily have the cash available to do so, it allows me to purchase them before they start taking off in value. Perfect example is the 430 Scuderia I wanted to buy. And if I had financed one a year and a half ago when I first got really serious about it, granted I couldn't find the car that I wanted, but if I had bought one then for $190,000, which is one I looked at, then I could have locked that in, and today that car is worth well over $300,000 based on the way the market's going. And so I would have saved $100,000 if I had made that purchase. That's what I was trying to do with like the 458 purchase, is I have a feeling the 458 is going to be taking off as well. Maybe not to the same extent that we had seen with the 430 Scuderia recently, but I still expect that to take off. And I want to get into the market now before I again got priced out of that market, or have not necessarily priced out, but at a point where I'm not comfortable spending that kind of money on it. And so if this car were to jump to say over $300,000 or higher, I wouldn't necessarily want to be spending that much money on that car at that point. But buying it at $240,000, it's an easier pill to swallow. And so financing cars when you don't necessarily have the cash to do so gives you that option to be able to get into that market ahead of the appreciation curve. Now, of course, on the flip side, if you go and you're looking at cars, most of your brand new cars, you're gonna see a big depreciation. You're not gonna go ahead and get into a situation where you're buying a car to get ahead of of the market. In that sense, it doesn't make sense to finance cars. But for this situation, yeah, it's a good way for me to justify it. And of course, I have a really good feeling on where that market's gonna go based off of all the decades of experience I have in the automotive industry. And then of course, being able to get into the market that much earlier with the vehicle, not only does it allow me to get the car before it starts to appreciate, but allows me to get into that community and meet new people and go on new events and have new experiences beyond just the financial aspect of it. So sure, there's definitely a financial benefit to financing vehicles, and you do have to be smart about it. If you're going out and you're getting a car loan at like 20-something% because you have terrible credit and you have no assets or anything, well, that's a hard one to go ahead and justify. But if you're trying to go ahead and find a way to put your money elsewhere for other investments and trying to get into auto markets before they go ahead and take off, things like that, sure, it makes sense to finance them. And that's why I've gone ahead and done it. Sure, there have been points in my life where I went ahead and financed vehicles just because I couldn't afford to do it any other way to get the vehicle, and I needed the vehicle. And so there's definitely been that aspect of it as well. But now at the point where I'm at in my life, I tend to finance vehicles mostly from a standpoint of it just makes more sense from a number standpoint, because I get better returns on my investment elsewhere and doesn't require me to have large sums of cash available. It works out really well for me in that regards. Plus, like I mentioned, being able to get into a new market segment, a vehicle, and a new community at an earlier age just makes it that much more fun and expose me to that much more of the automotive community, which in turn at this point, now that I have the YouTube channel and all of you guys, it allows me to have more content to share with all of you and expose you guys to more automotive events and activities that are going on around the world.